products for one great price. Their best-selling bundle at Casper.com. So you don't always have to win a series to be appreciated. And KD, Kevin Durant, and PG, Paul George, have a lot of similarities in this postseason. First, KD and PG, their initials are their nickname. They both bailed on Westbrook. They're both perennial all-stars, and they both chose the number 2 team in their city, the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Clippers. Both teamed up with an erratic, unpredictable, brilliant, but injury-prone co-star, Kyrie Irving for KD, Kawhi Leonard for Paul George. And both had heroic Game 5 performances in the series they eventually lost. They just ran out of gas. They both ran out of gas. I thought Paul George looked a little tired last night. Didn't have a terrible night, just didn't play as well as he did in his heroic Game 5. KD, Paul George, go look at their stats. Once the co-star got hurt, they're playing 43, 44 minutes, 35 and 10 and 30 and 10. KD and PG. The difference, though, is this, and this is the separator, is that Kevin Durant chose Kyrie over a great situation. Paul George chose Kawhi because he's never had the ideal situation. That's the difference. Kevin Durant left championships. He left stability. He left a great coach and a great co-star and a great roster and a great GM. Kevin Durant left great. And as I often say, be very careful about trying to get happier than happy. Paul George has never had an ideal situation. L.A. kid goes to the Pacers. They don't attract stars. They could never really get the roster to compete. And then he decides to go to, there's Oklahoma City, and there's a trade. And then he gets Westbrook, and Westbrook's hard to play with, and that doesn't work. KD would tell you that. And then he goes to the Clippers and gets Kawhi. And by the way, it's still a great fit. I do think Kawhi and Paul George, I think it works as long as you understand that Kawhi is highly unpredictable, non-communicative, very low verbal, and gets hurt a lot. But that's where they separate, and that's where I've got a little sympathy for Paul George. It's very hard in professional sports. The harder you work in college, the worse business you go to. For the rest of us, that's not the way it is. We generally have at least a couple of choices out of college if we've worked really hard and come out with a great GPA, good connections, great internship. You may get a couple of offers. It's not the way it works for basketball players. The greater you are, the lousier GM, often the lousier roster, coach, owner, it's all bad. And Paul George, not that the Pacers were lousy, has never really had an ideal fit, and he's seeking that. And he's moving to find that. That's why I always defend players on mobility. KD had it and left. Paul talks about the Clippers, the series, and the season.
The narrative of me not being a postseason player or all of that, I never understood it. I came up short again. I'm proud of what we did as a team. I wasn't out to prove nothing to nobody, but to show up as a leader for this team, put us in position to get to where we got to. Again, came up short. My good wasn't enough, but there's room for improvement.
By the way, I will say this. If Kawhi was healthy, we've discussed that he's often not, I do think the Clippers have a deeper roster than Phoenix. I love the Phoenix starting five, and I love how they're constructed. I think the Clippers have the deepest, most talented roster in the NBA. I really do. And I think Dallas figured that out in Game 7. Takes them a while to figure stuff out because they got so many dudes that can play. But no excuses. It's over. Phoenix deserved the win. There's no question about that. But we also have to acknowledge this is a really good Clipper team. This is a really deep roster. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Well, Giannis had an MRI on his injured knee yesterday. Luckily, he avoided major structural damage, but the hyperextension was confirmed, and he is listed as doubtful for tonight's Game 5. And the timetable for his return is unclear. The Hawks could also be missing Trae Young again. He's listed as questionable, as well as Clint Capella, who suffered an eye injury after taking an elbow to the face late in Game 4. Yeah. So it could be a pretty starless night tonight for Game 5. The Fox bet has the Bucks favored by 3.
Well, the Bucks also have a roster that is capable of being competent. We should expect them to be, even without Giannis. Brook Lopez, you have size. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, P.J. Tucker. Got a coach and a system that's been intact for years. So Milwaukee, without Giannis, is still better than Atlanta if Trae Young doesn't play.
I don't know.
You'd think.
They didn't have Trae Young last game.
Well, I know.
They had Giannis for the first half.
That speaks to Milwaukee and the frustration following that. Listen, if the Clippers can beat the Suns without Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi is probably has got more dexterity as a player than Giannis, he can do more things, you should be able to beat Atlanta without Giannis. If you're facing Atlanta without Trae Young, you still. What's the line on that game tonight, by the way?
Bucks are favored by 3.
Yeah, they should be. Bucks should win tonight. Will they play well?
Will they?
But they should be favored.
They should, yes. But again, like every time that Atlanta is counted out, Atlanta just plays with a different sense of urgency to me than the Bucks do.
Yeah.
It's just a very inartistic game that the Bucks are playing right now. And not having Giannis obviously is huge, and it sucks. We want to see all the stars out there and everybody at full capacity playing against each other. May the best team win. But we've seen throughout these playoffs that's likely not going to be the case. You're going to have some sort of injury or someone's going to be out for one reason or another.
Yeah.
That's how this is going. Now, this is the second straight year that Giannis has dealt with an injury in the postseason because you remember he had the sprained ankle against the Heat. So overall, he's not an injury-prone player, but this is 2 years in a row now in the postseason that he's been unavailable. I think I'm leaning towards Atlanta tonight just because Atlanta just keeps seeming to find a way. Now, Trae Young's questionable, so him and Clint may still play tonight. We're likely not going to see Giannis since he's doubtful, but we'll have to wait till closer to the game to find out. So the Suns eliminated the Clippers 130-103, Game 6 win last night to advance to their first NBA Finals since 1993. And Jay Crowder, who's become an unbelievably crucial player if you want to make it to the NBA Finals, said they knew the night was theirs when Pat Beverly pushed Chris Paul.
We knew they broke. We knew we broke them. I mean, there's no better sign of defeat than knowing that moment. You know, that moment where it's like competition meets and you can't do anything else to help your team overcome that situation. He just broke. Once we knew we got the game won, we knew at some point it would break. And I think that's basically what you saw. You saw a breaking point with one of their leaders in their locker room.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling to have, especially in the playoffs. Such a great feeling.
Guys like Jay Crowder really are never appreciated. So when Chris Paul, who plays 30 minutes a night, when he's off the floor, Jay's the only guy that's ever played in big games. And Crowder's one of those guys. You know people around the league like him because he's played with a bunch of different teams. He's out of work very briefly. And in this series, he had a couple of moments when he didn't shoot terribly well. But Jay Crowder is what the league used to have a lot of, right? Like Jay Crowder is big, he's tough, he talks, he's physical, he's coachable.